Our next presentation is Individual and Community Traditions Shape Cooking Matters, Recipe Adaptations.
My name is Biehl, and I am a SNAP Ed educator and tribal outreach educator with Michigan State University Extension. And I'm sharing some takeaways from a Cooking Matters adaptation project with 4 tribal communities in Michigan and the Intertribal Council of Michigan. So like I said, we're in Michigan, which is the ancestral and current homelands of Anishinaabe peoples, specifically Potawatomi, Odawa, and Ojibwe people. And I had the opportunity to work with 4 of the 12 federally recognized tribes in Michigan on this project. The Hannahville Potawatomi Indian community, the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, Bay Mills Indian community, and the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. And you can see on this map kind of where they're located across the state. So, Cooking Matters, if you're not familiar with it, it is a nutrition education and cooking very hands-on class. It provides a lot of different lessons and talks about different aspects of nutrition, food safety, cooking skills, as well as hands-on cooking exercises. So every week at the end of a Cooking Matters class, the participants come home with a bag of groceries. And the groceries that they take home are the ingredients needed to practice those recipes at home that they made in the class, and then share it with their families and their communities. So for this reason and many others, Cooking Matters tends to be a popular program among communities, but it also has many challenges, as any program would. So some of the classes can be quite long, up to 2 hours, because they're nutrition and cooking. It takes a lot of preparation from the facilitator to prep for the class and buy groceries. It's hard to recruit adult participants and help them to keep coming back to a class every week. And then there are lots of Cooking Matters recipes, but they're not necessarily tailored to every cultural community, and in this case, not necessarily for Michigan's Anishinaabe communities. Cooking Matters at Home is one type of curriculum within Cooking Matters Suite, and it's a little bit more flexible than other versions. So MSU Extension, the Intertribal Council of Michigan, and the 4 tribes that I mentioned got together and said, well, can we try this Cooking Matters at Home model with our communities? Will it work better? Will people come back? Can we adapt the recipes to include more traditional foods? And then will the participants actually like those recipes? Will they like the program? So how this worked was MSU Extension SNAP Ed instructors facilitated these nutrition and cooking classes, and the staff from community health centers at each tribe helped recruit participants, manage the logistics, and in some cases participate in the classes. And then the Intertribal Council of Michigan provided funding. And then the participants did focus groups at the end to share their experiences. So out of this, we had 5 to 6 weekly or bi-weekly sessions each site with 30 adult participants, 7 to 8 people per class on average, and an 86% retention rate, which was great. And some of the things we heard about why people kept coming back was the staff sent text and email reminders saying, hey, we're doing this again next week, come back. Some said they really liked a smaller class size because they got to build more community with their community members. And then there were some strong relationships between the different partners on the program and then with participants. Also, we heard that it was helpful for the extension educators to approach with curiosity and learn from the participants about their own traditions instead of approaching as an expert on nutrition. Also, just communicating well and being flexible with schedule changes and all sorts of things helped. So I mentioned we also worked on adapting recipes. So essentially, the community health staff from the tribes picked out 14 different recipes that they wanted to try out with the communities. And then out of those 14, 8 were adopted to include more foods that were local and considered traditional, and also just that the participants thought could be adapted to be better. And so 11 recipes just remained as is. And so the participants got some adapted and some not adapted. So some of the reasons that these recipes ended up being adapted were, for example, to support what we kind of talked about as community traditions that supported food sovereignty, so thinking about those local foods that the community as a whole may have considered traditional, like maple syrup. But then also we heard a lot about participants who had a variety of backgrounds and histories and shared histories that weren't necessarily tribal, for example, but were kind of very multicultural. So the participants had to kind of balance wanting to support local and indigenous foods, but also meeting the needs and preferences of different participants. Also, we heard at one site, especially from elders, that some foods, they're great, but they're hard to prepare. Like a squash, it's hard to cut that up and in order to bake it. So we just adapted a recipe to make it using frozen cubed squash, but still have this delicious recipe at the end. So there were, of course, many challenges, one of them being that we wanted to include a lot more local foods, but they weren't necessarily available at all sites. And if they were available, they were expensive. Wild rice was a great example, and bison. However, that's kind of pointed towards opportunities to align this type of program with other initiatives like the food pharmacy programs that really improve access to more local, traditional, and indigenous foods. And then we also thought that in the future, for these things to continue, it would be really helpful to also involve cultural leaders and knowledge keepers in each community in more of the adaptation process because they hold a lot of traditional knowledge that not all of the participants had necessarily. So I just want to say thank you to all the participants and all of the health staff across the state that were involved in this, and hopefully this can continue into the future. Thank you, and miigwech.